I messed up tonight. I lost another fight. I still mess up, but I'll just start again. I keep falling down. I keep on hitting the ground. I always get enough to see what's next. Birds don't just fly, they fall down and get up. Nobody learns without getting it wrong. I won't give up, no I won't give in till I reach the end and then I'll start again. No I won't leave, I wanna try everything. I wanna try even though I could fail.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Zootopia Minute, the minute-by-minute podcast where we review and analyze everybody's favorite hit film of 2016, Zootopia. I am your host, Simul, joined, as usual, by...
Your good friend Choco, here to provide you some escapism from whatever is happening in the world right now.
Yeah, because there sure is a lot happening, and we'll be sure to get to it.
We are practicing social distancing right now because I'm in Orlando, Florida, and you are in Seattle, Washington. So we are on opposite coasts. Social distancing at its best.
Who would have thought that we'd have all this practice social distancing with each other anyways, just by doing this over the internet?
And I guess before we begin, I do want to say, around the time we're recording this, it happens to be co-host Simul's birthday, so...
No, it's not. That's a lie.
Send him a belated birthday message after.
We're recording this after my birthday. Choco's not being honest.
I know, but it's close enough to your birthday that we could say happy birthday. Okay.
Whatever. All right, anyways, so this is minute 78 of the film Zootopia. So for those of you following along at home, that's going to be from timestamp 1:18:00 to 1:18:59. And this minute picks up right where the last one left off. Remember, Judy has returned home to Bunnyborough after resigning from the ZPD. And right as we start, who pulls up but Gideon Grey? We begin with a line from her dad, right on time. Judy remarks, "Hey, is that Gideon Grey?" Stu says, "Yep, sure is. Work with him now." They explain further that he is their partner for their pastry business, which is pretty neat, pretty unexpected. Judy remarks how great it is that they have seen past their former prejudices, and then goes up to talk to Gideon, who apologizes to her for the way that he behaved in his youth. Judy seems to accept this apology, and Gideon then reveals that he brought them all some pies. This minute ends as Stu Hops, who's Judy's dad, yells at some kids to not run through some Mindecampum Holosyphilis, to which Gideon remarks, "Well, now there's a $4 word, Mr. H. My family always just called them night howlers." And the minute ends on Judy beginning to say, "I'm sorry?" Something of a stunned look on her face. And right off the bat, you can tell there is certainly some significance to that, isn't there? But we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's start here from the beginning. So first thing we see here, right on time, as Gideon's van pulls up, Judy remarking, "Is that Gideon Grey?" And it is interesting. You have to think this is actually going to be the first time that Judy's probably seen him in a very long time.
Yeah, I guess we don't know what really happened after her experience with Gideon in the earlier minutes we've seen. Probably they interacted a lot after that, since assuming they lived in the same small town. But this is probably her first time seeing Gideon since at least leaving for Zootopia.
Yeah, I assume so. Although if they've lived in the same neighborhood this whole time, you'd think maybe they must have seen each other.
I think maybe they went to, because I would say they probably went off to different schools. But if it's such a small town like it's being described, I couldn't imagine there'd be enough schools, the demand for having two different school systems. So
could be, I suppose. Well, anyway, Judy asks, "Is that Gideon Grey?" Stu then replies, "Yep, sure is. We work with him now." And then Judy's mom, Bonnie, says, "He's our partner, and we would never have considered it if you had not opened our minds." That's right. I mean, Gid's turned into one of the top pastry chefs in the Tri-Boroughs. And then Judy remarks, "That's really cool, you guys." And this, I think, is a really interesting point that I want to highlight here, because it shows that her parents, remember at the beginning of this movie, her dad was trying to give her all this fox spray and fox repellent and fox taser and all this stuff, which Judy had issues with, right? Because she's saying, no, listen, they're not all inherently bad. You guys need to open your minds a bit. And now you can see they actually have shifted a bit from that position, which is really interesting to see. And I think something that's important to take away from this is the fact that people do change their minds about prejudices.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they're exposed more to the reality of different peoples, different cultures, things like that.
Which is why I'm not necessarily a fan of people who like dig up tweets from like 10 years ago and
Yes.
try to use that as an excuse to show, oh, this person is very bad. It's like, oh, no, people can change. And
yeah, you
we
knew
should-
exactly
we should
where I was
embrace
going
it.
with this.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so we have to imagine that this change that Judy's parents had towards Gideon must have had happened within when she did the initial phone call after moving to Zootopia and working with the police force and now. So a relatively, let's say, short span of time. Because it was her first case. And the fact that they're already working with Gideon so quickly after is actually impressive. In fact, the fact that Gideon used to be the bully of their child and that their child convinced them enough to work with their child's former bully is kind of interesting.
Actually, I'm really glad that you're bringing up the point about him being a bully, too. Let's go forward in the dialogue here, and we'll sort of come back to this because I think it's all sort of part of the same idea here. So Judy says, hey, yeah, that's really cool, you guys. Gideon then proceeds to take some pastries out of the back of the van here, but looks up when he hears Judy say, Gideon Gray, I'll be darned. To which he responds, hey, Judy, I'd just like to say I'm sorry for the way I behaved in my youth. I had a lot of self-doubt, and it manifested itself in the form of unchecked rage and aggression. I was a real jerk. I was a major jerk. And first thing, this is something that many people have pointed out online. This sounds a lot like therapy talk. This almost sounds like word for word like the type of language that a psychiatrist would use to help someone work through their aggressiveness.
So I was wondering how naturalistic this felt because, yeah, on one hand, I could see it as therapy talk, but it's mostly because I've been distilled through similar tropes within movies and fiction. So I don't know how if you ever went back to a high school reunion, but I've been back to some high school reunions, especially since mine was a military academy where hazing was a big thing. So I did meet up with classmates who I guess people would consider bullies in normal high school situations. And they sometimes do acknowledge they were bad, but not in this way. So maybe they didn't go to therapy, but they addressed it in some way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the reason I think this is so interesting is we sort of have a mirror image here. There are two instances of people shifting away from a more ignorant mindset into a more open one. We have Judy's parents shifting away from their prejudices towards foxes, and we have Gideon Gray maturing, growing up a bit, and realizing, yeah, he was a major jerk in his youth, and he needs to change his ways to, be a more contributing, functioning member of society. So it kind of goes both ways here, and I think the most important thing to take away, and what we've touched on already, and what we'll continue to touch on here now, is people do, in fact, change. And like you were saying, this sort of current culture we have, if you want to call it call out culture or cancel culture or anything like that, where we tend to hyper focus on things that have been said in the past or our own preconceived notions of the way a person thinks, or like this person is hateful, this person thinks badly about certain types of people, they're racist, they're sexist, they're whatever you want to call it. There's certainly our own prejudices that we can put into making those sorts of assessments about people, basing those opinions on one thing a person may have said in the past, and how there's prejudice on both ends, both in the maybe certain people do need to change their ways, but there's also prejudice in the way that we try and interact or respond to those people where we see where we perceive prejudices on their end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so I do think this is really important here. People do change, and I think it's interesting because especially like with the way politics are right now, there's a lot of people saying, look, if someone holds certain views, it's not at all acceptable that we even hear them out. The whole deplatforming thing as well. But you can hear stories about ex-KKK people that left the KKK because they made friends with an African American or something like that. There's stories like that all over the place. And I feel like the lesson here is much following the thread of this whole movie, I think, is prejudice exists everywhere on every side.
And that's obviously the theme of the movie. So it's good to show at this moment the change happening with two characters from two different sides of the I guess animal spectrum.
Animal spectrum, yes. I do think this is a really good minute that sort of encapsulates that whole idea for sure.
Yeah. So I guess while we're talking about Gideon, I do want to point out from an artist's perspective, I kind of want to just talk a little bit more about his van. So it's funny because I'm looking at his van and the design on it, Gideon's gray, baked stuff, fresh produce from Hop's Family Farm. I could identify every single one of those fonts right away.
Oh,
and
really?
And I want to describe how the at least the top part of the van, even though I think it might be a naturally red van, but from the lighting perspective, it looks really, really pink. It has a very kawaii anime perspective. So if you guys ever been to anime cons and look at anime con artists in the artist alley, they actually do a lot of theming of their booth like that. It's normally pink pastel colors with some cream and white on top. And specifically the pie has that kawaii anime face on top of it. So I just want to point out the aesthetic of the van. He must be some type of weeb or otaku to get inspired for a van like that.
The candy stripes have the sort of La Boulange sort of thing going on as well.
Yeah.
It definitely looks I would say that's definitely an overtly pink van, however.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Judy's shirt is also pink and they're in the same lighting and he's wearing a pink apron and everything.
True. I also want to point out that the font that the Hop's Family Farm is in it stands out much greater from the other ones. And that's like the exact same aesthetic I use for my convention history book because it kind of looks like that Comic-Con font.
You know what? I do recognize that font because I think almost every YouTuber on Earth has used it in a video thumbnail at some point.
So that one, I think that one is a variation of what's called Impact. So yeah.
Impact is more like straight.
Well, yeah,
it's
there's
a little
straight.
less
I forgot what the other.
kooky.
Okay, I know what font this is because I used it for my con history.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the name, but I do know what you're talking about, I think. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah.
So the next bit of dialogue that occurs here, Gideon has just apologized to Judy, and Judy responds, "Well, I know a thing or two about being a jerk," and she sort of smiles. There's a bit of a pause as Judy's parents approach the van as well. Gideon takes out a tray of pies and says, "Anyhow, I brought you all these pies." And then something very interesting happens. There's a moment where Stu kind of turns around because he seems to hear something, and he sees 3 of the bunny children running towards a line of purple flowers. He then calls out, "Hey kids, don't you run through that Mindacampum Holyscythius." There we go, got it. For those that don't know, I just took like 4 tries to pronounce that, and then I cut the rest out.
He actually took 6 tries.
Whatever. Anyways, real quick, we have heard this name before, haven't we?
Yes.
And then we see the bunny children kind of stop and go, whoa, 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 and then they kind of run away from it. Gideon then responds, "Well, now there's a $4 word, Mr. H. My family just used to call them night howlers." And Judy gets a suddenly sort of stunned look on her face and begins to say, "I'm sorry?" And that's where the minute ends. Something very significant has just occurred. But before we get to that, I want to point out, whose kids are these? Are these like Judy's younger siblings? Are they still having kids? Or like what's going on?
They're bunnies, as expected.
Is this whole town just one giant family?
Well, I think it's supposed to be a Southern hick town because they called Bunnyboro a hick town. You know, a bunch of white Southerners. I don't know.
It's offensive, Choco.
I know. Sorry, Mr. Seattle.
No, but people from Seattle would call it that. I'm the
Okay.
exception, okay?
Sure. Okay, I want to talk about the situation specifically right here. The fact that Judy's dad was so alert to stop the kids from running into there, and then the kids were also on alert to stop. They know that these flowers must be deadly or poisonous. So
There's something about them that means you shouldn't.
So one, why aren't they like at least partitions off from like the rest so people can't randomly run into it? 2, why are the kids just noticing these bright purple flowers that they were about to run into, but they know it's already so scary? The larger kid puts his arms out and go, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." It's like, "Oh, don't run." It's like he's saying, "Don't run all over the cliff." And then the kids are, "Oh, whoa, 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 there's a cliff."
Right. Yeah, there's clearly something about them that's significant here. And something else that's significant is, if you guys remember back, this is not the first time we've heard this scientific name. Choco, do you remember when this name came up previously?
Oh, no, I do not remember when it came up.
Really?
Enlighten me.
Well, if you remember back, I don't remember which minute it was, but it was when Judy was chasing Duke Weaselton through Little Rodentia and eventually caught him. What was it that he was carrying? A bag of moldy onions is what Bogo would have called it, but Judy corrected Bogo, saying, actually, sir, it's Mindecampum holoscytheus. Interesting. So clearly something is happening here. And then, of course, the thing we've kind of been dancing around a bit, my family used to just always call them night howlers. Where have we heard night howlers before, Choco?
Okay, that's another issue I have with this part. The fact that Judy knows the long scientific name of this specific plant but doesn't know the common name of the plant.
Well, maybe it's not a common name, that Gideon is saying his family calls them that.
Okay, then why does Judy's dad say the long scientific name? I don't say, oh, I'm going to drink some ice cold monohydrogen monoxide, or whatever it's called again. I'm not a scientist anymore.
Dihydrogen monoxide?
Sure, I'm not at Hopkins anymore, okay?
Well, first of all, dihydrogen monoxide, anyone who's ever had that stuff has died, so you really got to be careful about that.
I know,
but
true.
Anyways, I don't know, couldn't tell you, but it is interesting that they're called night howlers because we have heard this before, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Where we've heard this before, Choco, is when Montius was explaining to Judy what he had seen when he saw Emmett begin to go wild, right?
Yes.
He was yelling about the night howlers. Judy has assumed up to this point that night howlers referred to the wolves that were working for Mayor Lionheart, as we later found out. But now we're getting a hint that maybe that's not actually what was meant after all. So now we're starting to see these plot points from way back in the movie come back to now, and things are starting to be tied together, and maybe now we're beginning to get the hint of what's actually going on, what actually might be the cause of all this chaos in Zootopia. But to find out more about it, we'll have to tune in to a later minute. All right, so that's going to do it for the minute portion of this episode, I think. So there's a lot of other stuff we want to talk about. It has been a while since we did our live episode at HarmonyCon. Big thanks to anyone who came to check that out, and big thanks to No Whacking as well for joining us as our special guest. It's been quite a while since we've recorded. There's several reasons for that. One of them, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is the fact that the whole world is kind of going crazy right now because of the coronavirus situation. And we are no exception to that. We've both been pretty heavily hit by that. Many different conventions have been forced to cancel because of this. Choco, you vend at conventions. How has this affected you?
So my livelihood, 100% of my income actually comes from vending at conventions. And so actually this weekend I was supposed to be one of the community guests at a convention in Chicago called Windy City PonyCon. Mm-hmm. That unfortunately was canceled. The next con I was supposed to be a guest at is BabsCon in San Francisco. That was also canceled. So at the moment, 7 of my planned conventions have been canceled or postponed. And the times that have been postponed overlap of other conventions I am booked for. So basically, my income, at least 50% of my income this year or more, has been affected, depending on how many more cons will be canceled. So it's affected us quite a bit. And yeah, you might assume because we now have this time off, it's kind of like spring break, we should be able to record more episodes. But a lot of other factors have been halting us from being able to get more episodes out. So because I cannot sell in person anymore, I have to shift to online sales. So a lot of my time has been occupied with trying to manage online sales at the moment.
Yeah. It's been really rough. And obviously, those of you listening to this right now, you know that already. I'm sure all of you have had your lives impacted by this event as well. I mean, it's truly a global thing. That this pandemic, and that's what it is. It's truly a global thing happening right now. This is like a once every 100 years kind of deal. The last time anything this crazy happened was the Spanish flu during World War I, and that was a little over 100 years ago. I think it was 1918. So, I mean, it does suck, the fact that it has this impact and it has caused these cancellations. I mean, Emerald City Comic-Con, massive comic convention in Seattle, had to be postponed to the summer because of this.
Yeah, that was another con I was supposed to be at last minute. I got a table there off the wait list very last minute, and by the time I was confirmed between the time I was confirmed for the table and when they announced the closing or the cancellation of that con was within less than a 12-hour time span.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's really sad. I mean, SakuraCon, big anime convention in Seattle, that one got canceled outright. They're just not able to do one this year. BabsCon, which was the same weekend as SakuraCon, also had to be canceled. It's only happening next year now. Windy City, as you mentioned. Although there's certain ways that it's really cool to see the community come together in solidarity over this kind of thing, because many people that both of us know, Choco, are vendors at cons, and a good portion of their income does come from it. We've seen some really cool community efforts to sort of set up online alternatives, online shops. And actually, this past weekend, when Winnie City should have taken place, we actually got to take part in Ponyfest Online, which was a sort of online quote-unquote convention based around the Brony community. I was involved with planning on that. I handled everything on their events side.
So I guess if you guys don't know, my good friend Ruth, she was the one who inspired the concept of an online. Well, actually, a lot of other cons were doing quote-unquote online artist alleys. But
it's been a concept,
but within the pony fandom, my friend Ruth was the one who really got that started. And she organized an online vendor hall on Discord for a lot of displaced pony, anime, and furry artists. And that online Discord vendor hall was really, really successful. So about a week afterwards, I think that inspired one of our other friends to come up with the concept to do Ponyfest online. And Ruth was continued to help run the vendor hall for that too. I haven't actually counted sales yet because I haven't been able to sell all the invoices. But based on how much interest I've been getting, it seems like for myself and other artists, it might not replace the cons that had to be canceled, but it's helping us tide us over for at least the next paycheck or so.
Yeah. So Ponyfest Online, we did panels, we had a live stream. We actually got more than 4,000 members in our Discord server, which completely blew everyone away. I don't think anyone expected it to do so well. So thank you so much to anyone who did attend Ponyfest Online. We are doing another one. It's going to take place April 25th. So in about another month here, we're going to do a second one, and we're trying to up the level of programming for that as well. So definitely check that out. And if you did attend this one this weekend, thank you so much. And again, please purchase things from these vendors, because a lot of them don't have any other source of income. A lot of them depend on these sales to make their livelihood. And of course, the other side of this too is that I understand that a lot of people don't have spending money right now. It's not just vendors, right? A lot of people have gotten laid off or furloughed because businesses are closing everywhere. And, our economy is taking a downturn because of this, unfortunately. It's going to affect everyone.
I'm wondering how this will work, because around the time we are doing this podcast, the bill has already been signed to have the paychecks go out to help people who are now not unable to work and get a paycheck.
This is in the U.S.,
But for a lot of us vendors, we are self-employed, so it's going to be a trickier situation. So I'm just curious how that's all going to play out, especially for self-employed vendors like myself who don't have an actual paycheck that we get from work like other people would normally.
So we are just about out of time for this episode, but just before we go, if you haven't noticed, we're not very good at keeping a regular schedule. And given what's going on, unfortunately, that's probably not going to change anytime soon. There's many different factors leading to Choco and I having difficulty finding time to record, finding time to edit. It does take a very long time for me to edit the audio for these episodes. So moving forward, still can't promise a very regular schedule, but we do appreciate you guys for sticking with us regardless.
So again, everybody, we do apologize for the schedule. Like we said, when we started the show, we modeled ourselves off the Star Wars Minute and other Minute by Minute podcast. However, we took a different track because we wanted to be more up to date on recent events. We elected to do an episode by episode podcast as opposed to what the other Minute by Minute guys do and normally record 5 episodes in one sitting. We might change it up in the future. It depends on what the plan is. We're hoping to use this free time we have with the shutdown in our respective areas to maybe try to upload more frequently. We can't promise that, but we hope you guys stick with us for the near future.
Yep, really appreciate it. So everyone out there, please stay healthy. When people say to social distance, to stay home, they mean it. This isn't a joke.
Just be like the bunny children. Stay as far away as you can from the night howlers.
Yes, social distance from the night howlers. So we can get through this, but we got to get through it together. Listen to the CDC, listen to what your local governments are saying to do, and stay healthy, guys.
Yeah, stay healthy.
So that is going to do it for this episode of Zootopia Minute. If you did enjoy the show, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter at Zootopia Minute, like us on Facebook under that same name. And if you have any thoughts at all about the show, anything you'd like to share with us whatsoever, you can always send those to zootopiaminute@gmail.com. And with that, guys, we will bid you adieu until whenever we get around to recording the next episode. Stay healthy.
Bye, everybody. Stay tight.
See you later.